April 2025. Jaguar's European sales figures land: 49 cars. Not 49,000, 49. Down from 1,961 the April before. A 97.5% collapse. 5 months earlier, the company had deleted every photograph from its social media and replaced a century of heritage with an advert containing no car at all. Elon Musk replied with 4 words: "Do you sell cars?" But the decisions that led to this moment didn't start in a marketing department. They started in a black hole garage 100 years ago. Blackpool, 1922. On the 4th of September, his 21st birthday, a young man named William Lyons signed the paperwork for a business called the Swallow Sidecar Company at 5 Bloomfield Road. His partner was William Walmsley, a 30-year-old neighbour. Their fathers had guaranteed a £1,000 loan between them. The product was hand-built aluminium sidecars bolted onto reconditioned army motorcycles. There was nothing glamorous about it. 2 lads in a seaside town, working with their hands, hoping the sums added up by Friday. Within 5 years, Lyons was rebodying Austin 7s. The business outgrew Blackpool entirely. By 1928, they'd relocated to a former munitions works on Holbrook Lane in Coventry, a city that would define everything that followed. The first SS1 motor car appeared in 1931. The company became SS Cars Limited in 1933. And the first model to carry the name Jaguar, the SS Jaguar 100, rolled out in 1935. Every one of those names, every one of those addresses, would matter later when people tried to understand what exactly had been lost. The Coventry factory that gave Britain one of its proudest industrial names would be absorbed into British Leyland before the decade was out. By 1945, the initials SS had become unsalvageable. The Schutzstaffel had poisoned them worldwide. At a shareholders' meeting on the 23rd of March, Lyons told the room the name carried unpleasant connotations, and the company was reborn as Jaguar Cars Limited. It was a practical decision from a practical man. Lyons understood branding the way a bricklayer understands mortar. You don't argue about it, you make it hold. In November 2024, a different group of people at the same company would take a very different view of what a brand name required. Then came the car that proved what Jaguar actually was. At the 1948 London Motor Show at Earl's Court, the company unveiled the XK120, originally intended as nothing more than a show car to demonstrate a new twin-cam straight-six engine designed by William Haynes. The public response forced it into production. The 120 in the name was a promise: 120 miles per hour. On the 30th of May 1949, on a closed stretch of the Ostend to Jabeki motorway in Belgium, test driver Ron Soapy Sutton pushed chassis number 670002 to a flying mile average of 126 miles per hour with the hood fitted. With the windscreen removed and an aluminium undertray bolted underneath, the car hit 132 miles per hour. Motorsport magazine called it the highest speed ever attained by a production car. The XK120 wasn't just fast. It was proof that a company from Blackpool could embarrass every established manufacturer in Europe with a car designed and built in Coventry. That engine, and the reputation it created, would be sold to British Leyland within 2 decades. What followed was the most dominant run in the history of endurance racing. Jaguar won the 24 Hours of Le Mans 5 times in 7 years. In 1951, the C-Type won on debut, Peter Walker and Peter Whitehead crossing the line with a 9-lap margin, despite 2 of 3 factory cars retiring with oil pressure failures. In 1953, the C-Type came back fitted with disc brakes, borrowed from aircraft technology, an innovation developed with Dunlop that no other racing team had attempted at this level. It was an industry first, and it changed motorsport overnight. Tony Rolt and Duncan Hamilton averaged 105 miles per hour across the full 24 hours. First time Le Mans had ever been won above 100 miles per hour. Jaguars finished first, second, fourth, and ninth. Within 3 years, every competitive manufacturer in the world had adopted disc brakes. Jaguar had not just won a race, they had rewritten the engineering rules for everyone else. The 1955 victory carried no celebration. Mike Hawthorne and Ivor Bueb drove a D-Type across the line at a race scarred by Pierre Leveg's Mercedes crash, which killed more than 80 spectators. Mercedes withdrew. Jaguar's name went on the trophy, but nobody at the factory wanted to talk about it. But 1957 was different. The long-nosed D-Type with its 3.8-litre engine, driven by Ron Flockhart and Ivor Bueb, completed 4,397 kilometres. D-Types took first, second, third, fourth and sixth. The most comprehensive single-mark domination Le Mans had ever seen. 5 cars in the top 6. A small engineering company from the West Midlands had beaten every factory team in continental Europe repeatedly, with technology developed on a workshop floor rather than in a research university. The trophies are still displayed at the Jaguar Heritage Trust in Coventry today. Whether the company that won them still exists in any meaningful sense is the question this story is ultimately about. On the 15th of March 1961, at the Geneva Motor Show, Jaguar unveiled the E-Type. Designed by aerodynamicist Malcolm Sayer, built to deliver 150 miles per hour with 4-wheel disc brakes, independent rear suspension, and a monocoque chassis. The price in Britain was around £2,250. A Ferrari 250 GT cost roughly double. PR manager Bob Berry drove the launch car from Coventry to Geneva, arriving minutes before the doors opened. The response was so overwhelming that Norman Dewis was ordered to drive a second car through the night. According to legend, as reported by Jaguar test driver Dewis himself, Enzo Ferrari approached the stand and called it the most beautiful car ever made. Ferrari never said those words on record. The earliest written source is a biography from 1988, published after his death, but the line has been repeated so often that it hardly matters whether it's true. It became true through repetition, and the car earned it either way. The E-Type is now displayed in the permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art in New York, one of only 6 cars in the world considered significant enough to sit alongside a Picasso. By September 1968, the XJ6 arrived, costing over £6 million to develop. It replaced 4 aging saloon ranges with a single platform and won European Car of the Year in 1969. Autocar praised its uncanny silence. Priced at roughly a third of a Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow, it sold in vast numbers. By the time the Series 3 ended production in 1992, around 400,000 XJ6s had been built. The XJ6 was the high watermark of everything William Lyons had created. It was also the last pure Jaguar, because Lyons had already signed the company away. In 1966, he merged Jaguar with the British Motor Corporation to form British Motor Holdings. In January 1968, BMH merged with Leyland Motor Corporation to create British Leyland. The promise was world-class scale. The reality, as Cardiff Business School's Professor Garrel Rees later described it, was an Orwellian scale in complexity, which really added up towards organised chaos. Jaguar was now one division inside a corporation of 170,000 employees that couldn't agree on which way to face. And the consequences arrived almost immediately. Industrial relations didn't just decline, they fell off a cliff. Wildcat strikes, both inside Jaguar's plants and across the supply chain, throttled XJ6 production from the moment British Leyland took control. A 6-week dispute at Wolverhampton Die Casting in 1969 forced cars to be delivered short of components. Profits from Jaguar were siphoned off to subsidise loss-making volume brands. The name that had won Le Mans 5 times was now being managed by the same organisation running Austin Allegro production. Quality cratered. Customers who had bought Jaguars for the engineering began buying Mercedes for the reliability. By 1974, British Leyland was bankrupt. On the 17th of June 1975, the Wilson government accepted Sir Don Ryder's report and nationalised the company. The initial cash injection was £246 million. Total projected support eventually approached £2.8 billion, roughly 1.2% of the entire UK economy at the time. Margaret Thatcher, then opposition leader, called it British wasteland. The Hansard record shows British Leyland was directly employing 170,000 people, with another 150,000 component industry jobs dependent on it. Thatcher later admitted that closure would have cost the balance of trade £2 billion a year. So the checks kept coming. The government couldn't afford to let it die. They couldn't afford to keep it alive either. They wrote the checks anyway. When Sir John Egan took over as CEO on the 17th of April 1980, he had to cross a picket line to reach his desk at Browns Lane. The numbers he inherited were brutal. Jaguar was losing roughly £50 million a year, about £237 million in today's money. 9,200 workers were producing fewer than 15,000 cars. That's barely 1.6 cars per head, well below break-even. Egan and his team identified 150 major faults in every car rolling off the line. He told Motor Magazine he didn't have a saleable product until the quality was right. Around 60% of quality problems came not from Jaguar's own workforce, but from 1,700 outside suppliers. The paint plant at Castle Bromwich, the same factory that had built Spitfires in the war, could only produce bodies in yellow, red and white. Every single body had to be repainted at Browns Lane. BL chairman Sir Michael Edwards gave Egan an ultimatum. Break even in 1981, turn a profit in 1982, or the factory closes for good. Egan instituted quality circles modelled on the Japanese system. He threatened suppliers whose defect rate exceeded 1.5% with chargebacks for the full warranty cost. Those who refused were cut. He walked the factory floor daily, spoke to the line workers, and treated them as the people who could fix the problem rather than the people who were causing it. The distinction mattered. Production climbed from 14,865 in 1980 to 28,000 by 1983, just shy of the 30,000 break-even target. A favourable dollar exchange rate carried the rest. Jaguar was privatised in 1984. Egan and the workers on the factory floor had saved the company from extinction through sheer bloody-minded refusal to accept what everyone outside the gates had already accepted. If the story had stopped there, Jaguar would be remembered as the greatest turnaround in British industrial history. It didn't stop there. Ford had been watching. In late 1989, Ford bought Jaguar for $2.5 billion, roughly £1.6 billion. The Deseret News noted the price was more than 5 times Jaguar's net asset value. Lee Iacocca thought it a lot to pay for a marquee. Ford poured an estimated $17 billion into its premier automotive group, which bundled Jaguar alongside Aston Martin, Volvo, and Land Rover. Some of that money built good cars. The S-Type in 1999 shared its platform with the Lincoln LS and was the less damaging of the two big compromises. The X-Type in 2001 was the other one. Built on the second-generation Ford Mondeo's CD132 platform. Modified for all-wheel drive, it was Jaguar's Cadillac Cimarron moment. The car that told the world the badge was worth less than the metal it was stamped on. Ford projected 100,000 sales a year. Defenders will tell you the wheelbase was shortened by 44 millimeters. No exterior dimensions were shared. and the V6 had unique heads and engine management. One Jaguar engineer told AR Online the X-Type was less closely related to the Mondeo than the Audi A4 was to the VW Passat. That may have been technically accurate. It did not matter. The X-Type peaked near 50,000 units and sank to under 11,000 by 2005. North American sales ended in late 2007. The model was killed off in 2009. Buyers smelled Mondeo and walked away. Perception is the only engineering that counts in a showroom, and the showrooms were emptying. According to industry analyst Eric Merkel of IRN Incorporated, Jaguar never made a profit under Ford. Not once in 19 years of ownership. Estimates of cumulative losses run into the $10 billion range, though the line between Jaguar-specific spending and wider Premier Automotive Group investment is blurry, depending on who draws it. Against the backdrop of Ford's own $14.5 billion loss in 2008, both British brands were put up for sale. The company that had paid £1.6 billion for Jaguar alone was now looking for anyone willing to take it off their hands. On the 26th of March 2008, Ford signed the agreement to sell Jaguar and Land Rover to Tata Motors of India. The deal closed on the 2nd of June at a headline price of $2.3 billion, widely reported in Britain as £1.15 billion. Ford then contributed up to $600 million to the pension plans, making the effective net price roughly $850 million. Ford had paid $2.5 billion for Jaguar and $2.7 billion for Land Rover separately. The combined write-down before any research and development spending is counted was roughly $4.35 billion, and Ratan Tata's timing looked catastrophic. The ink dried weeks before Lehman Brothers collapsed and the global financial system caught fire. Fleet Street called it an act of charity. British tabloids questioned whether an Indian company understood British luxury. They were wrong on both counts. Tata did something Ford never quite managed. They left the engineers alone. Capital went in. Competent leadership was appointed, and the product cycle was allowed to run without a Detroit committee second-guessing every panel gap. Land Rover, particularly the Range Rover Sport and the resurrected Defender, became the cash engine. Within a decade, JLR's enterprise value grew from roughly £5 billion to £25 billion. The F-Type in 2013 revived Jaguar's sports car credibility with a snarl from its exhaust note that made people on pavement stop and look. The F-Pace SUV in 2016 won World Car of the Year. For a few years, it looked like the narrative had finally turned. Two brands, one profitable conglomerate, a success story manufactured in the Midlands. Then the headwinds arrived, and they arrived from every direction simultaneously. A global semiconductor shortage strangled production lines across the entire automotive industry. China's luxury market, which JLR had bet heavily on, slumped. COVID shut the plants for months. Brexit added customs friction to every component crossing the channel. And in 2019, JLR took a £3.1 billion non-cash impairment charge against Jaguar's intangible assets. In accounting language, that's an admission that the brand on the balance sheet is not worth what you've been telling shareholders it's worth. It was the largest write-down in British automotive history. CEO Adrian Mardell publicly conceded that Jaguar's models were generating close to zero profitability by 2024. Land Rover was carrying every pound of profit in the building. Jaguar, the name that had beaten Ferrari at Le Mans, the name that had allegedly made Enzo Ferrari himself reach for a compliment, was now a line item being kept alive by its stablemates' Range Rover sales. The company that built the E-Type needed someone else to pay its electricity bill. Something had to change. What changed was everything. That was the backdrop to what happened on the 18th of November 2024. Jaguar wiped its social media accounts clean. Every Le Mans photograph, every heritage post, every carefully curated image. From a century of racing, design, and engineering, deleted. The next day came the new identity. Created by Accenture Song under JLR Chief Creative Officer Jerry McGovern, it replaced the leaping cat and the growler badge with a minimalist wordmark in mixed case. The slogans read, "Copy nothing, delete ordinary, live vivid, create exuberant, break molds." The accompanying 30-second launch film showed models in avant-garde pastel clothing posing in surreal pink and yellow landscapes. Not a single car, not a bonnet, not a wheel arch, not a badge. 160 million views inside 48 hours. For all the wrong reasons. Elon Musk asked if they sold cars. German tabloid Bild ran a poll, and 93% of roughly 18,000 respondents called the rebrand creepy and disconnected from the brand. Nigel Farage called it commercial suicide and predicted the company would go bust. Several commentators noted an unintentional echo of Apple's legendary 1984 Super Bowl advert, except that Apple's version was selling a computer that changed the world, and Jaguar's version was selling nothing at all. The press response from Forbes, CNBC, The New York Times, and The Sun was almost uniformly hostile. William Lyons had changed the company name in 1945 because the old one carried unpleasant connotations. 80 years later, the marketing department deleted the connotations that were pleasant. In early December 2024, at Miami Art Week, Jaguar revealed the Type 00 concept car, a fuchsia pink electric Grand Tourer with no rear window, brutally long bonneted, intended as a directional reference for the production electric vehicle due in 2026. A Monaco blue version followed. Instagram comments on both were dominated by accusations that the company was actively destroying its own heritage. Opinion was not so much divided as uniformly hostile at different volumes. Jaguar's managing director Rawdon Glover defended the strategy in the Financial Times and elsewhere. The brand had to leave behind its existing clientele, he said, to reach younger, wealthier, more urban shoppers willing to pay roughly double the old transaction price. He explicitly rejected the criticism about the carless advert, arguing that showing a car would have anchored expectations to the past. Marketing professor Mark Ritson pointed out that Jaguar's golden era pitch, grace, space, pace, was something a car buyer could understand and remember. The new vocabulary of exuberant modernism was not. 3 words that told you exactly what you were buying, replaced by 2 words that told you nothing at all. The sales figures told the rest of the story with the kind of blunt clarity that no marketing campaign can spin. Jaguar had deliberately wound down most ICE production through 2024 to pivot to a full EV lineup for 2026. The European Automobile Manufacturers Association data showed the consequences in plain numbers. January to April 2025, Jaguar registered 2,665 vehicles in Europe, a 75% year-on-year decline. April alone, 49 cars. To put that in perspective, a single Range Rover dealership in Surrey probably shifts more metal in a wet Tuesday. Global Jaguar sales for the 2024 to 2025 financial year fell to roughly 26,862 vehicles, an 85% drop compared to 2018. Jaguar and JLR counter that there were almost no new Jaguars to sell, that the production pause was planned, that these numbers reflect a deliberate transition rather than a demand collapse. Both things are true at the same time. The production was wound down on purpose. Whether anyone turns up when it starts again is the question that 49 European sales in a single month cannot answer. Jaguar was always more than a car company to Britain. Browns Lane, Castle Bromwich, Solihull. These were the beating heart of West Midlands manufacturing for the better part of a century. Castle Bromwich itself built Supermarine Spitfires in the Second World War before it became Jaguar's body plant. The workers who riveted Spitfire fuselages in 1943 were succeeded by workers who welded XJ bodies in 1973. The factory floor changed, but the pride of the work didn't. The mark was sewn into post-war British identity in ways that Mercedes and Audi never quite managed at home. Inspector Morse's Burgundy Mark II on ITV from 1987 onwards. The E-Types driven by Steve McQueen, George Best, Frank Sinatra and Brigitte Bardot. The Prime Ministerial XJs of Wilson, Callaghan, Thatcher and Blair. The bulletproof state Jaguars that still carry the monarch today. For Coventry and the wider West Midlands, the name meant something beyond cars. It meant that skilled people in skilled jobs could build something world-class in a region that kept being told by London and the South East that it couldn't. The 2024 rebrand landed in a country that had already watched Honda close its Swindon plant in 2021 and still remembered the slow death of MG Rover at Longbridge in 2005. West Midlands MPs raised concerns about JLR's planned ICE shutdown and the implications for thousands of supply chain jobs in communities where the car industry wasn't a sector. It was the economy. The fear wasn't abstract. It had postcodes and payroll numbers attached. Whether the 2026 production cars rescue Jaguar or confirm what the critics have been saying will determine how November 2024 is remembered. Brave reinvention, or the month a 102-year-old British icon chose to erase itself. William Lyons started with aluminium sidecars and a £1,000 loan on Bloomfield Road in Blackpool. His company outran Ferrari at Le Mans. It survived British Leyland. It survived nationalisation. It survived 19 profitless years under Ford. It survived a global financial crisis that hit the week the new owners took the keys. The leaping cat has been through worse odds than this and landed on its feet every time. Every crisis had a John Egan, a Ratan Tata, someone willing to fight for what the name meant. But it has never, in a century of existence, voluntarily deleted its own past. That part is new, and nobody yet knows whether the car due in 2026 will be worth the price of everything that was discarded to make room for it, or whether the people Jaguar chose to leave behind were the only ones who ever truly wanted one in the first place. If this story landed with you, subscribe. I cover the rise and fall of Britain's iconic companies every week. And if you want the full story of another brand that bet everything and lost, that video is on screen now.